Thing that I'd mentioned sort of in passing, and I had been tempting myself to try and drag you along for a wide area having to do with this, but I don't know how wide I could drag you. And so I'm just going back and say it, and maybe say one or two little things as a preface to tonight. all the many times that you may have thought it was just a kind of mechanical talk of somebody saying like, or that I would point out here and there before and after a statement, and I'll say, well, now words are not going to cover this. But do you recall in the last several weeks, I asked you sort of a rhetorical question, what if, and you should always try and turn things inside out, even things I told you. Even if they sound just right, like there is the word, if not of Larry. There's the final statement on that matter. That's not true. And so I'll ask you, if you recall, what if this thing, that, and I'm not the first one to ever say that, well, now we got to an area now that words won't cover it. Good old ordinary, back in the city religious people, for thousands of damn years have been saying, well, you can't describe God. And of course the reason they say that is they don't know what the hell God is. Or they, never seen him. Or they say, I can't tell you, God talks to me, but I get messages from God, but I can't tell you exactly what he says because words won't cover it. The reason words won't cover it is God don't talk to them. But what if words do cover things, except your ears can hear the words can make literal sense, but the mind cannot see around the corner of what these words actually reflect when you add an additional dimension. All right, that's not the end of it. I was going to give an example, and this is the one, as I said, that I had considered just going on for hours, days, weeks, because this should take you and spread you out for thousands of acres, maybe just an inch deep, but getting closer to the glue that holds the swamp together. Not worrying about, as everybody else does, that if they could ever find the truth, whatever that is, that would be like being dropped into the ocean, thousands of feet deep, the truth just surrounded. Perhaps you're going to drown in it, and I'm suggesting to you that perhaps it would be more like that just only maybe cover your toes, an inch deep, but it's just as far as you can see. Here it goes. Remember where all this started? This is just a preface. We're not even into the heart of it yet. This is the overture. Wait until you hear the symphony. What if words do cover things? Anything, everything. That words can adequately convey anything that anybody, including me, tries to convey, except beyond you hearing the words and them making sense. I'm not talking about just making some ridiculous statement or babbling some non sequitur, that you actually can hear it, but you cannot see the implications of it around the corner that takes one more dimension than words convey. I could just bring out any example. How about the things I've had Kairoot say, any kind of one-liner. If you're going to hit the king, if you're going to strike the king, you should kill him. Or a real revolutionist should be the first to say hello and goodbye. Just picked out two at random. From that, ordinary intelligence could say that such statements are either reflections or intended to be taken literally and are pointing toward reality of some specific sort, or else they are metaphors. It's one of the two. Or to get closer to the symphonic sounds I was going to make to the heart of tonight, based upon many things I've said directly and implied, we could say that, all right, men either talk too much, they just talk too much, or they don't. And we could go on with this, just anything, right? People either eat too much or they don't eat too much. So you've always got these two examples of anything you want to come up with. It doesn't have to be apparently metaphysical or unusual of any sort. But that would seem to cover anything that you want to discuss. It makes the comparisons that reach the maximum needed degree for ordinary intelligence. So let's go to talk, because that's what I'm going to get into tonight. That, all right, people, based upon many things I've said and implied and jokes I've made, then ordinary intelligence, if it had been sitting around listening to me, which some of you invited in with you on some nights, and I don't appreciate it, but that's all right. We could say, for ordinary intelligence, that I have implied or said directly that people talk too much. So, not taking my word as being the absolute word of Larry, then let's say, to cover ourselves, to try and be intellectual about it, we could say, all right, the subject of whether men talk too much has been brought up. Here is what we're faced with, to ask ourselves a question, the kinds of lines to inquire into this. The starting point would be this, verbally. The proposition, the question. Men either talk too much or they don't. Now, that's not a trick yet, because that covers all possibilities in the 3D world, does it not? That if I say men talk too much, or I imply, I say it's a possibility. And before we go any further, then everyone's ordinary intelligence can say, all right, what he's trying to point at. The situation being presented to our minds is that men either talk too much, or the way I look at it, he's saying they do, that men either talk too much, that's one possibility, but the possibility is that he's wrong. And so either men talk too much or they don't. Now, based upon anything that the mind can do at the ordinary level, that covers all possibilities. There's nowhere else you can go with it. The men either talk too much or they don't. The third possibility I can put in words. Are you ready? And it does cover it. Except some of you may get a little flash here. Do the Episcopalians, does the time of Epiphany have anything to do with Easter? Are we close? Never mind. Some of you may get a flash. Men either talk too much or they don't. Here is the unseen possibility that words cover, and yet the mind cannot see the implication. It cannot see around the corner. You ready? Here's the two possibilities that cover it to ordinary intelligence in this particular subject. Men either talk too much or they don't. The third possibility to that sentence is men either do that or they don't. And the third possibility is that's not true. Or no, they don't. But that's stretching the mind even a little bit. But it's not true. That little sentence, that makes sense. Anybody can understand if I say, all right, my sentence I'm going to talk to is, that's not true. Everybody understands what that means. But now put to the sentence, put to the area of inquiry, that men either talk too much, one possibility, or they don't. And it's got to be one or the other. The third possibility, though, is it's not true. The men either talk too much or they don't. No, they don't. Then ordinary intelligence, except those of you who may get a quick glimpse, about the most it could do if it believed I was serious would say, well, you're talking in some kind of Zen, pseudo-Zen fashion. I mean, that is indeed exemplary of a non sequitur, because it almost makes sense, but it doesn't. That you can't take saying, that's not true. I'm sure somewhere, I didn't specialize by any means in symbolic logic or philosophy in high school or grammar school, but I'm sure somewhere there's probably a Latin name to say that that kind of argument at the very least is spurious, that you can't give two possibilities and then say that the whole premise is not true, which ordinary intelligence would probably say, well, that's all you're doing. And it's not. The words cover it, and yet the intellect hits it and goes, that either something is true or it's not. Men either talk too much or they don't. The third possibility is that that's not true. But then the mind goes, that's ridiculous, because the way you put it, it's got to be true based on what I said. Ordinary intelligence would say, is you said that, all right, men either talk too much or they don't. And now you can't come along and say, well, that's not so. But you can. That's the possibility that the ordinary intellect cannot fathom. As I said, I consider talking about that for hours, days, weeks, or minutes. I believe I'll leave it at minutes. And any of you who go further with it will readily see why I left it at minutes. And some of you may be amazed that I drug it out even to minutes. It probably should have been left at seconds. But it is indeed Any of you, and it's not necessary that you have a moment of blinding insight right now, but if you remember that example, that's just one, but anything you want to pick out, almost, that is a living, true, correct example of the fact that third possibilities can be brought verbally to the intellect's attention. That is, the very things that I have normally and still referred to many times as being uncoverable by mere words, that in a sense that is not correct. And I have just given you a prime example, probably the example. I don't know how to improve upon it until some of you get around the corner, and then I wouldn't have to give you that kind of example. But to say that, all right, men either talk too much or they don't, and what's the third possibility? There is none, right? Yes, there is. That's not so. That is the third possibility. It is not a non sequitur. It is not pseudo-zen. It's not me trying to play with words. That's it. That's the third possibility that's always there. Of the intellect saying, well, I've either got to do this, which it seems like I do, or else I just won't do it and suffer the consequences. It's one or the other. The third possibility is, no, it's not. I've either got to do that or pay the price. No, you don't. You've either got to do that. If you don't do this, there's no way out. Yes, there is. Look, it's either one or the other. No, it's not. But the intellect cannot do anything with that, because the intellect is the one that is left on that basis of whatever the subject. It doesn't have to be talk, it could be anything. To say, all right, it's either do it or don't. No, it's not. Now, having given it even minutes, now let me go into something that I had already brought up last time we met that is tied into my example. Is a few, I'll still call them real revolutionists, a few extraordinary, a few real revolutionists here and there may be silent all they want to, but life demands that the people, life demands that everybody else engage in mucho talk. Absolutely requires it. And there's a way in which you need to see that talk, and the way I'm going to try and sketch it out a little more in the water, that this kind of talk is not recognized, it is not labeled as such, but it acts as a kind of facilitation. It acts as a kind of lubrication to change, to growth. Now, no need for me to dwell on this. Surely enough of you listen the best you can, and then at times even listen out of ordinary ears, and you would think if anything would fit into a general category of being prime suspect to be kicked by me throughout all this time would be just blabber, just useless talk, even talk to yourself. But ordinary talk is an absolute necessity for life to grow through man. It is a kind of fat. It's a kind of cushioning. It's padding. It's carpet padding that you've got to have. It is like assurances to children on real frightening nights. It doesn't matter much what you say. It's thundering, the wind's blowing, the trees and the shadows, and your little kid, some little nipper squeals out, and you go in. It doesn't matter much what you say. The kid goes, oh, something's at the window. It doesn't matter that you go into some description about how the optics, the laws of optics have to do with the moon shining on limbs and them making them shine in your room and make... All you got to do with a kid is say most anything. Just cushion him or her. You're like a little carpet padding. Just, it's nothing, it's nothing, it's nothing. Go to sleep, go to sleep. Come on, come on. Just blabber. It is absolute, necessary blabber for life. To the general overall aspect of life, what we call talk is not simply talk. Talk is a form of change. At the very least, if you want some breathing room, talk is always an adjunct to change. At the very least. That's just to give you breathing room, because the first part, the way I put it, is correct. But it's a little blunt, I know. But to life, human talk is not mere talk. Talk is a form of change. A couple of examples. They're recent enough, they're in my lifetime, I can think of. There was a eyewitness historian of something or other that I recall, was making the comment, it was some kind of civil uprising at the time, like a rebellion in whatever country he was writing. And it was one of these affairs that was up and down, and the Third Estate was winning for a while, and then royalty would win. But the guy pointed out that at times this kind of ragtag rebellion, they finally succeeded. I recall the example now of what it was, but he pointed out words to this effect. Or I may be quoting. If not, he should write so good as this. He said that at times the revolution was running on only verbal adrenaline. You follow that? But under certain conditions, that's all that's necessary. Can you follow? Whatever the particular example, I'm not even going to tell you what it was, it doesn't matter. But here it is, this group trying to overthrow the powers that be. Outnumbered, outgunned, outmoneyed. And at times they should have, based upon the logistics of it, should have succumbed completely and been a forgotten dot on a history book page. And yet they've persevered. They go up and down. At times they're out of funds. They're almost out of people to support them. And yet, can you imagine this going on, that kind of ordinary historical revolution of sorts? The few of them keep getting together, talking to each other, running out in the streets and screaming out, "Fuck the king," or wherever it is. You know, up with the people, and then have to run and hide and get to each other and slap each other on the back and hit each other on the shoulder. "Come on, we'll get them tomorrow. You know, we'll get more money. Something will happen." That the thing just held together, according to this eyewitness. At times it got so bad that the only thing that you could say was fueling the revolution. At what times, if you called it was there at the time, probably it seemed dormant even. But he was supposed to be an acute keeping up with the few people that were actively involved throughout it. And he said at times the revolution was running on nothing more than verbal adrenaline. Now, from one ordinary view, you could take that as, boy, those guys are really something. There's a real heart of freedom, or they were real fanatics of some sort, that they got to the point that the only thing they had to sustain them, the only thing that seemed to keep this whole idea of them taking power going was their own words. Wow. You can say it that way, or you could look at it another way, even from the ordinary city view, and say, well, they may have succeeded, but that's not much of a life. If what you're doing you can sustain by mere talk, and you could go from one step from that to things that some ordinary intelligence might believe that I've said before, to just make an attack in general on just talk. Where people just talk. Hey, let's overthrow the king. Let's overthrow the king. They meet, how many years they've been meeting? How many months? And they say, well, so I got to go home to my wife. And they just talk, and it doesn't amount to anything. You miss it. He hit it. He didn't know it by saying that at times the revolution, that is the change, the growth going on, the change going on, at times was fueled by no more than verbal adrenaline. Another example, to run a spectrum from history up to the contemporaneously ridiculous, I guess, I read somewhere that somebody was talking about Disney World or Disneyland, and I keep reading about these. I have read several times about the kind of tricks and the kind of psychological ploys they try to use at Disney, one in Florida, whichever it is, the worst one. They claim that there's lines like 30 minutes at everything, and the kind of things that they use to keep people distracted, or they use 2 sets of lines and all kinds of stuff. But at one time I read a guy, they had done some sort of exit inquiries to people that had been there, or asked them to fill out a form. And some guy pointed out, like a vice president in charge of people control or something, he said that based upon, and Walt Disney Company doesn't fool around, so it's not just some guy running his mouth, I know that. He said that they had good evidence, from however they got it, from the inquiries or the polling of people, that not only did the people waiting in line in general to these attractions or rides not mind the wait, that by and large they seem to enjoy it. Which I can accept a lot of things in life, but at any rate, never mind. We're not interested in me. That and all sorts of mass events, sporting events. I've tried to get you to look at certain aspects of that before, that people do not go out to a football game just to go to a football game. You should be able to see that. People do not go to a symphony concert or a rock concert just to go hear the music. That shouldn't be that hard to see. That, the people waiting in line for these rides and attractions at an amusement park, who, once it's over and they got nothing to prove, will admit that not only did they not mind the wait, but they in fact enjoyed it. What you're talking about is an unrecognized form of talk going on. What you're dealing with is an unnoted, an unrecognized form of a collective conversation. And of course the people are not necessarily talking to one another. The little families waiting in line, they may talk to each other, and you might turn to a stranger and ahead of you or behind you go, boy, it's hot today, or isn't it nice here? Or at the football game. You may, if you took a date, you may say something to your date, and you may turn to a stranger may turn to you and go, was that a pass or not? You go, yeah, hey. Not that though. The whole mass is engaged in a kind of unnoticed collective conversation. The 72,000 people there at the game are talking. Not just the hollering out, yay team, and not just little words to each other. They are talking. The people in line waiting to do, apparently, that which they came to do. The conclusion to the sentence. I paid my money to see these attractions, to go on these rides. And they spend more time waiting to do it, and yet they say, the waiting's fun. I don't mind. The waiting itself is fun. Now you could say, well, psychologically, that is nonsense. I don't understand that. They're engaged in an unnoted form of conversation. All mass collections of people, religiously, any kind of event that brings together a group of people, even if they were silent. Like at the symphony, of course they talked beforehand, but there were signs up that as soon as you walked into the symphony hall, you couldn't talk, whatever it was. Religious, where they require silence. The group, anytime groups of people, numbers of people are together, they are engaged in a form, that is, life is, but through them, they're engaged in a form of collective talk, even if they're not talking. Now, if somebody, a real revolutionist, a would-be revolutionist, somebody trying to do whatever this is, if you simply drift along with this widespread, it's inescapable because it's necessary to life, of this kind of collective conversation, this kind of necessary talk, then there is an aspect that you should note. That even if the talk, which it happens with ordinary people, and you can fall into it, you've already been through it, you'll hear it. If you're content with that, that is, of talk being a form of change, then at times when talk seemed to have been the impetus, or from talk seemed to have arisen change, it never really tastes right to a few people. Those kind of few people, as I start out saying, that here and there can go around and be as quiet as they want to. Just a few people. The rest of them got to talk. Now I can give you examples. It should be easy enough to hear, and I could even make some ordinary people go, yeah, for a second. But anyway, I was just trying to tell you how easy this is to hear once I point it out. Talk being a form of change. But for people correctly involved with this, it never tastes right, and here it comes, and you'll be able to hear it. Surely all of you. But remember, I said even when the talk apparently was the mother of some ultimate change, it's still, you go, you didn't know what it was. Now I'm going to tell you. So many examples rush to my mind, I get dizzy. No, I don't. My mind is like Grand Central Station with many, many tracks. I'm getting dizzy. All right. Let me just take an ordinary situation. Man and woman. Let's say they're married to make it come out right, because I was going to say marriage counselor. They keep having these little problems, and then they break up. They're on the verge of breaking up. They talk about it, and then they keep saying, or at least one of them does, I don't want to break up. I don't want to break up. And they say, well, what we need is some kind of outside help, a marriage counselor. Now, I could have used one person going into analysis to see a psychiatrist. Let's say a marriage counselor, and you go. And a person sits there, and you go for weeks or for months, and you talk. One person talks, another person talks. The marriage counselor talks. And let us say that somewhere along the line, then maybe you stop, and you both say, well, this has been some help, and I believe now that at least the major problems where they were that we thought we had have been surpassed. We believe the worst is over. That is, the marriage counseling did some good. But for my kind of people, or would-be real revolutionists, if apparently some progress was made through talk, you get through, you wanted to quit drinking, and you can't seem to do it. But you're just sure you want to change, so you go join an AA or some support group, and what do? It's not just AA, there are other forms now, I think, but there are drugs, all kinds of stuff. It's a form of psychiatry, it's a form of talking analysis, but you go to an AA meeting, and you continue forever to talk. Even after you hadn't drank for years, you're supposed to stand up, sometimes be sociable, and say, my name's Fred or Mary, and I'm an alcoholic, and I haven't drunk in 14 years, and I feel so much better, and I want to encourage you new people not to drink, and blah, 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 blah. That never tastes right to a real revolutionist. Never. It does not taste the same as if you had engaged in silent, unilateral, sudden change. That is, I need to quit drinking. And you just barely told yourself that. Just barely. And you just laid it down, and you never said a word about it. Not only to anybody else, you never even listened to your own dialogue say, boy, I'm proud of what you... Only that comes close to tasting for a real revolutionist. Not everybody else, although everybody else, many of them could hear little bits of this. They wouldn't do anything with it, they just hear little bits like, yeah, running your business out in the street, trying to get other people to encourage you to do something, or I don't know whether you're correct, but I know most of my life things I thought I'd done, I got through with them. I wanted to make some change, and I got through, and I didn't feel all that great about it. But so what? You know, that's life. I'm telling you, religions, any kind of mass activity to where you end up, and talk is either, it's according to how you can see it. But I've told you talk is a form of change. But if that's too blunt right now, but any activity wherein talk on your part, that is, you're involved with it, even if you don't talk, that you take the talk seriously. If the talk seems to be the change itself, or, to give you a little breathing room, can be seen as being an adjunct. a co-conspirator, a cooperative force in some change that actually seems to occur. That is, well, I have quit drinking. Now that I've joined AA, I have not had a drink since I came here and admitted, and they all talk to me, and you've got a list of phone numbers that, you know, if you feel like you're going to drink, you call up somebody in the middle of the night, and they rush over and talk you out of it. For years, I always had another version in mind, but nobody seemed to be interested. Never mind. At any rate, it's based on talk. It's not based on drugs, at least the original AA. It's not based on any kind of adverse, negative reinforcement, shock treatments and such as that. It's talk. Talk, talk, talk. You're supposed to stand up and admit, I'm a drunk. I'm an alcoholic. And then if you feel like that you're about to weaken and have a drink, you call up somebody and they rush over, and what they do, they don't come over and shoot you and knock you out. They come over and they talk to you. You pay whatever it is now, several $100s an hour to see a good analyst. And what does he do? Well, the talking analyst, the classical psychiatric treatment in the West, he does not give you drugs. He doesn't even check your blood pressure. He talks to you. He wants you to talk. All right, even when it seems as though talk itself has facilitated change to a real revolutionist, to somebody with any burgeoning new intelligence, that don't get it. Something is wrong. Even though apparently what you had in mind, that is, all right, I did quit drinking. My wife, my husband, we seem to now, I can't tell you how, but going there for weeks, months, with that marriage counselor and just talking and talking, the tension, the pressures, the immediate threat of our breakup seems to have passed. So talk in some way did bring about what I saw as the desired result. It did seem to do it. But what is lacking is what would be real revolutionary, a real revolutionary approach, and that would be compared to that which works in the city, that which does what life needs. To a real revolutionist, it is not the same if it was unilateral, silent, and sudden change. You don't go talk to anybody. You don't even tell anybody what you're doing. You don't plan it. You don't write it down. You don't give yourself a note and say, I'll do it next week. You don't ask anybody's opinion. You don't ask somebody, have you ever done it? You don't ask somebody, how do you do it? And when you do it, you don't tell somebody you did it. You don't congratulate yourself. You don't let anybody else congratulate you. It's silent. It's unilateral. And it's sudden. Then you got something. Now in the city it doesn't matter. But if somebody's doing this, that is the only thing that tastes right. And there's a reason, of course. The reason is that's the only thing that really begins to approach a more complex change. It's the kind of change that would normally take generations, that is more than one person's conscious, intellectual lifetime. Everybody else is involved with inconclusive conclusions, incomplete sentences. They seem to be complete, like, well, I wanted to quit drinking, and here I am at my weekly AA meeting, and I can say truthfully, I'm an alcoholic. My name's Bob or Fred, and I'm an alcoholic, and I have not had a drink in 14 years. So, I wanted to quit drinking 14 years ago. This, I got to give it credit. AA, and me doing whatever you do in AA, I quit drinking. But why don't they feel right? And they say they don't. Part of AA is, they always say, well, we don't say that we are recovered or we're cured alcoholics. We say we're alcoholics that hadn't had a drink. That is, I'm still sick. But in some way, if I say that I'm still sick, then I'm not that sick. And it's not just AA. There's just a great example. Religions. I converted. I am now a Catholic. Oh, I'm not a good person. I'm still a sinner. But now I'm a Catholic. I'm a Christian. I'm a Muslim. Now I've done that. That was the right thing to do. Right? Everybody, yes. At least all the Catholics have said yes, the right thing to do. Well, of course, I'm not really a Catholic. That is the same thing as saying I'm an alcoholic. I hadn't had a drink. It's like saying, all right, I'm a sinner, but now I'm a Catholic. Well, now I'm a Catholic sinner. I can't really do it, but I say that I am, and I admit that I can't. And it's like the mass of whoever's there, and I don't mean mass in the religious sense of the Catholic Church, but the group of people there, and the whole group, the body of the church. It's as though they agree like, yes, yes, yes. Same thing as you staying up. A person at an AA meeting saying, I'm an alcoholic, I'm not cured, I'm an alcoholic, but I hadn't had a drink in 14 years, and everybody there at the meeting and all other members of AA, as a whole body, it's as though they're going, yes, yes. They are contributing. It is an unnoticed collective conversation. And it does change things. It does work. But it works at such a slow pace. It's like standing in the Everglades and actually trying to see that the thing is a river, which it is. But if you stand there and look, you think, well, you know, I only got a 2-week vacation as far as I can tell. It ain't going anywhere. But it's actually a river. But you stand, and it would take more than one lifetime for you to get in sensation that, yeah, it is a river. It's going somewhere. A real revolutionist just easily needs to see that you have been stuck with everybody else in that kind of problem, that what you think of as change, things you attempted to do, and it just never, I'll say for a 4th time, tasted right, or a 5th time. It's just that the change did not seem to bring about that which you expected. Even though, apparently, the deed was done, that you quit drinking, that you saved your marriage, or whatever it was. And yet, apparently, you went from point A to point B. You know, it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. Pardon, though. It just was not. And why? I just told you why. I still haven't forgotten I was going to get back to the questions for the one-liners and the chi-roots that we had collectively read several weeks ago, and those of you that wanted me to expand on certain ones, I still got your request, your ideas, and one of them really comes to mind. One of the one-liner chi-roots was rigid mind, loose lips. And several people wrote that down, which I guess I shouldn't be surprised that somebody, if they're interested at all, like, could we hear a bit more? Here's a prime place to put it. You remember the one-liner was, and chi-root said, rigid mind, comma, or dash, if you're as melodramatic as I, and chi-root, or rigid mind, dash, not comma, loose lips. All right. Along the estuaries and mango groves in which we're trudging tonight, let me put it to you this way. Those with the stiffest agendas tend to talk about them the most. It's the way life is. Forget people now. We're not talking about psychological warts. But this is the way life makes things work. It produces in life what it would colloquially would be referred to as fanaticism and fanatics, which you can't have, of course, fanaticism without fanatics. Evangelizing, proselytizing, the spreading of something. Those involved with some kind of political or religious idea think they're spreading the truth, the good word. It's spreading energy by spreading talk. And those that apparently have the stiffest, which is another way of saying the more simplistic agenda, tend to talk about it the most. As far as I know, no human has ever been driven to put this in those particular words, and so I'm probably the first person that ever said it. But think about it just a second. I mean, if you just got ordinary acquaintances in the city that do not have any particular agenda, they're not a member of any church. We think back to the 60s, when a lot of you are hanging around and smoking those funny cigarettes and hanging out, being cool, being laid back. In that milieu, you didn't have any